Okay, we will stop the warm-up there. Anybody have something, or 3 parts they've exaggerated that they wanted to share with the class? Anybody have an idea? Yes, back there. Ooh, I can. Roots? Did you roots? Okay, great. Thank you, Cody. Good. Leaves. Okay. Anyone else? Did anyone else exaggerate something about their tree? Yes. Eileen, yes. Giant what? Giant squirrel. The exaggeration. Okay, Cody. Again. Giant leaves. All right, nice. Then again.
Red roots.
Big roots. All right. Red roots. We'll get into that a little bit later. It's actually a little bit different because what we're talking about is exaggeration, which is increasing or sort of modifying a certain aspect of a subject. So that is a part of expressionism. Expressionism. I am mispronouncing it all day, so I'm going to probably pronounce it a few different ways throughout the day. So when we say that, what is expressionism? Does anyone sort of have an idea of what that might be? If you don't, it's fine. Cody.
Can you over-exaggerate something?
Not exactly, but not a bad answer either. Does anyone else have an idea? No? Okay. So expressionism is an art form, and we'll get into the history a little bit later. So it's less over-explaining something as it's instead focusing more, instead of on accurate depictions of something, on more of a kind of emotional or sort of kind of like the aspect, the idea of something. When we talk about that, now for some reason the screen is yellow. I do not know why it is yellow. Hopefully Dr. Arnone will get back here at some point because I don't know why it's doing this. But if you can kind of make it out, we have a very realistic, very accurate portrait of a woman with a parasol or an umbrella being compared to this glowing portrait created by a name that I can't pronounce right now. So this is kind of what we're thinking. Hey, Dr. Arnone.
Yes.
It's yellow? I don't know why it's yellow. Huh?
One of the courses. There's a line on it.
I don't think it's a chord problem.
I can't. Might be one of the courses up there, but the battery also might be going.
Okay.
I mean, not the battery, but the board.
Okay.
Better if it's the board.
Okay. We'll just deal with what we can. Okay, so again, we're thinking more about non-accurate depictions of things when we're talking about expressionism. So what does that mean is, again, you're expressing your emotions through your work. You're not focusing on creating an accurate portrayal. You're focusing on creating an emotional sort of essence of your subject. So what are some other ways that someone can express emotion in art? Someone have an idea? What are some ways that they can express emotion in art? Yes, Cody.
Happiness.
Yeah, that's pretty straightforward. Thank you. You're raising your hand again.
Sadness.
Okay. Does anyone else have an idea? Molly?
Maybe showing somebody, like painting or drawing somebody with an emotion on their face.
Yeah, that's, again, a very straightforward way of doing things. Yep, no, that's good. Those are ways that you can express emotion. What I'm looking for more is sort of, what can you sort of do to your work? Now, Expressionism has an answer to that, and one of those answers is by using color. Now, again, if we weren't yellow right now, it would be a lot easier, but we're going to still try this exercise, and hopefully it works. So what I have is a collection of Expressionist work, and we're going to, as a team, sort of work together to try to figure out what kind of emotions are being expressed in these works. So, first one, or first two, I guess. We have a painting by Jeff Klena and a more famous artist, Picasso. So it's kind of hard to tell. Maybe you can sort of look at the middle line. It's going to be a lot easier to tell what you look at.
Actually, I think I can tell.
Can you can tell. What kind of emotion do you think these two pieces of work are expressing? Now, normally they aren't yellow, but you can kind of see sort of what the original color scheme was like underneath. Does anyone have an idea of maybe looking at even the images, the people in there? What kind of emotions, Molly?
Sadness.
Okay. That's not good. I had a marker somewhere. Yeah, sadness. Yes. Cody, did you raise your hand? Sadness. Okay. Yep, sadness, loneliness, isolation, and that you can see even without the colors. You can kind of see with the people. For Jeff Klein, very shadowed, very dark, kind of hard to tell any features. And then with Picasso, the figure is very hunched over, kind of isolated and in
turmoil.
a little bit in turmoil. This is from Picasso's Blue Period, where he painted a lot of works that were very depressing, very sad, very kind of compacted. But yeah, and Molly and Cody sort of had an idea of sort of, again, drawing or, literally expressing the emotion on the work. That's kind of what Picasso did, along with using color. All right, next two. These ones, again, are going to be a little bit harder to tell because of the yellow coloring. But sort of what are some emotions you might be getting from looking at these works? Molly, or were you raising your hand?
Happiness.
Happiness, kind of. It's a little bit. Yeah, Eiley.
Togetherness.
Togetherness. Anyone else have an idea? Yeah, happiness, togetherness. For Dimitri Wrights, we had some students say kind of comfortable, togetherness. For the Nellie Mae Rowe, we had people say celebration, excitement. Of course, if the yellow wasn't there, you'd be able to see the colors a lot better. But even with just that, you can see there's kind of a lot of movement. But if we can also look at these as a good example of expressionism because, accurate depictions have been thrown out the window. There's a lot of exaggeration. There's a lot of kind of messing about with form and shape. And that's, again, the key is expressing emotion, not focusing on accuracy. All right, next. Now, these two are more abstract expressionist paintings. But I'd say that since these colors are abstract but very focused heavily on the colors, it'd be even easier to sort of see what kind of emotion the artist may be trying to represent here. Someone have an idea for the Allsep one here on the right? Yes, Cody.
Angry.
Angry. Okay. What else? Yeah, last class or a few classes ago, we had anger, rage, frustration, a little bit of confusion. All right, then we have Daniela Schweinsberg. This one actually is a very polarizing one. We've had a lot of different ideas in a lot of different classes, but what do you guys kind of think looking at the Miss Daniela's painting here? What are some emotions that you guys might be thinking looking at it?
I don't know.
Okay. So we had a lot of different opinions for this one. Second period, people were saying it was very calm, very subdued, or not really subdued, calm, comforting, kind of just basic. Yeah, Adam. Yep.
So I think the one from Schweinberg.
Yeah.
I think it's displays the feeling of. It's hard to know, but I think it probably is a peace of serenity.
Serenity. Okay. Yeah. No, we had again. We've had calming. We've had soothing. Third period, everyone thought it was gross, disgusting. That's because, since it's difficult to tell, there's a lot of very darker greens and a lot of kind of rotting brown colors in there as well. Personally, I think it's more, calming, a little bit more soothing. Kind of reminds me of like pond water. Final ones, we have these ones. The Balestra here is trees. Again, kind of hard to tell because of the yellowness, but what are some emotions we're seeing with these two? Molly.
Maybe like beauty and happiness.
Beauty and happiness. Cody. Same things. Okay. Yeah. Happiness. Maybe excitement. Anyone else have an idea? And if not, that's fine. So I literally found these two by typing in happy expressionism. So these are, the use of bright popping colors, kind of. I mean, this one literally has a happy person on it. But, happiness, excitement. Personally, for me, Balestra, it's kind of soothing. I think it's very calm to me. And that's the fun thing about colors is everyone's going to kind of have their own thing about it. Everyone's going to kind of think their own opinion on it. So what we're going to do next is you guys are going to do another drawing for me. You're going to take some paper out, and then using the colored pencils on your guys' desk, I want you guys to create a flower. And I want you to kind of express an emotion with that flower using the colors on your table. So think about the examples we just went through. Think about what certain colors mean to you guys individually. I want you to use those colors to make a flower. And we use those colored pencils to express emotion, happiness, sadness, excitement. I've yet to see someone able to create a confused flower. That could be interesting. A confused flower. What kind of color would confusion be? Okay, we'll be done with that one for right now. Does anyone want to share what kind of emotions they had for their flower? And what did they try to express with this? Cody. Happiness. What colors do you use? Yellow. All right. Anyone else have an idea?
I'm saying.
Kylie, what do you got?
I did happiness too.
Happiness. What colors did you use?
All colors.
All right. I like it. Now, Isaiah, were you saying sad? And a happy daisy? Nice. Okay. Yeah. So happiness, I think, is a pretty interesting and easy one to express because you have a lot of different colors you can use, and everyone's happiness is also going to look a little bit different. So again, what is Expressionism? This is just some history. It's a style of painting, music, drama, in which an artist or writer seeks to express emotional experience rather than impressions of the external world. And by that, it means it's not looking for, again, accurate depictions. We are looking at more depicting these emotional experiences using color and using some more strategies that we're going to get into in a second. It was an art originally from the 19th century, or late 19th, early 20th. This was during about World War I, and it was created originally by Germans, actually. So if you actually want to think about early Expressionism, think about any art you've seen by Van Gogh. It's originated as an art to sort of escape from more traditional drawing, so very realistic portraits, very realistic landscapes, that kind of stuff. So, again, getting into it, sorry. How does one create expressionist art? So there are three kind of important aspects that we're going to go over today that I think are sort of the most important when it comes to expressionist art. So that is using distortion, which is creating an image and then finding a way to sort of distort the lines, the shapes, and just kind of, again, muddly up a bit. You can kind of see here this portrait where the face has been very much covered up where you can hardly tell it's human anymore. Excuse me. So, with that, never mind. Ignore that. So yeah, distortion, that's one of the big ones. Next, we have exaggeration, which we did this morning, where you guys exaggerated an aspect of a tree. In this case, you can exaggerate faces, bits of the body, or just aspects of it to sort of increase sort of an emotion. For like a shark, you could exaggerate the teeth to make it scarier, or you could exaggerate someone's head to sort of represent maybe intelligence or something like that. And actually, Picasso is known for Picasso did a lot of drawings with bulls. He was Spanish, and bullfighting is very important over there. So he used a lot of strategies, if this would load for me. So it might be difficult to kind of tell, but we can kind of see examples here. He's exaggerated the head as well as the horns a teensy bit. And then he's moved on to more sort of distorting it to the point where it's kind of hard to tell you're even looking at a cow. So this is examples of how Picasso has used distortion and exaggeration on animals that are important to his life, probably to his younger years, because again, bullfighting is very important in Spain, and he, as a Spanish man, probably went to a field. So those are examples of that, and then of course the third one is of course color, which we've talked about already. Now you can use all three. You can use all three of these separately to create these expressionist works, but it's when you sort of combine all three of them is when you really get some interesting work. I mean, even with this one, they have Mark Chagno has exaggerated forms, but he's also distorted them to an extent where they're very kind of cartoony and simple. But he's also used kind of bright and subdued colors to kind of make a sort of love, compassion, sort of calm energy to this work. Same kind of for this one. Now there's less exaggeration, but there's distortion of homes to where they've been very simplified, distortion of the boats, and then the use of kind of lighter, and as I said earlier, subdued, warmer colors makes it kind of a very calming image. Of course, some people might read it differently. And that's the other important part of expressionism that we touched on, is that everyone's going to have their own feelings or ideas about the work, because no one's going to read it the same. So the other big part of it is that it can, and we talked a lot about painting, but it can also, expressionism can also be a big part in drawing. And you still have examples of exaggeration and maybe even a little bit of distortion, or you have Jackson Pollock, and this is a heavy distortion of a portrait. So you can do it in drawing, and you can even do it with not portraits, with buildings. And these photos are bad enough as they are. The yellow doesn't make it any easier. But you can exaggerate buildings. You can use colors on buildings. You can. I had that marker, which I had earlier. I could demonstrate a little bit easier. Oh, there it is. So if you're going to make like a building, you could say like a skyline. It's like bigger building compared to all these little smaller ones over here. Use that to emphasize importance, emphasize your feeling towards that thing. And that's where the colors come in as well, because that adds an extra layer of importance. So the other big, and then next we have, we'll get into that in a second. The other important thing is that I mentioned line, shape, form, color. And an important thing to think about, again, is back to the first week where you guys talked about the elements of art. So essentially, expressionism is using those things we just talked about, distortion, exaggeration, and color, to kind of play with those. Because again, you're not focusing on accuracy, you're focusing on emotional depictions. So next we have examples of how kind of expressionism has changed throughout the years. We've seen some more classical stuff earlier with this class, but with these ones, we have more modern. This is kind of an example of punk art. And we can still see that aspects of expressionism are very important in these two works. So what are, if anybody can answer, sort of what are some examples of distortion, exaggeration, or possibly color that they can see within these two works? Anybody have something to say? Cody.
I see green.
Green, okay. What else? Eileen? Orange. Molly?
A lot of yellow.
A lot of yellow. So these are very bright, kind of peppy colors. Something you probably wouldn't expect on a more historical photo, which is what they're on. They have added this sort of color and expression to an old picture of Abraham Lincoln. So generally looking at old black and white photos, you probably wouldn't get too much excitement. But adding these happy colors to it kind of changes the meaning a little bit. Then on the left, anybody see some examples of either exaggeration, distortion? Not really too much color going on there, but what else? What can some people see? Molly.
They're probably exaggerating a picture of somebody with a mohawk, or they could be.
Yep. Miley? Yep, that's the usual example that I've been seeing, a very exaggerated tongue and even a very exaggerated and almost distorted skull. So punk rock itself was often meant to sort of express distaste for a system, often distaste for the government. It's often meant as a protest kind of art. So less the idea of an individual person, but more of the idea of maybe a movement or a group. So expressionism has changed throughout the years, because again, initially it started as a work to get away from traditional artwork, and it has become a sort of art form that can be used in almost anything that's meant to express meaning or emotion. So here we have a video that's also just kind of going to go over the stuff that we just talked about, maybe in a little bit more controlled fashion.
Of that style, called The Scream by Edward Munch. Expressionists were most interested in expressing emotions, and they would do this by manipulating the art elements. Our art elements are like line, shape, color, form, texture, and almost all of those have been changed in this particular image. The colors in the sky give us this feeling of anxiety. The screaming face also has an unpleasant sort of feeling. The artist was expressing his feelings in Europe before the pending wars. So we get that feeling through the work that he's done and by the way he's manipulated the art elements within the work. But there's always going to be a subject. How about this one? Can you see a subject? Well, it's called Woman with a Bicycle by de Kooning, and it's very hard to see somebody in there, but they're there. So sometimes you need to ask a few questions before you jump to a conclusion. In the center, there's an abstracted sort of woman shape, and then the bicycle might be a little harder to find. Why would he do this? Well, he was trying to express something either about the person and what he felt about them, or how he felt that her personality might best be represented. This painting is called Portrait of Pope Innocent X, and it's sometimes called The Screaming Pope by Francis Bacon. It's a nightmare. We've got these screechy colors coming down the front of the face screaming. It's very unpleasant. This isn't something you'd want to have in your living room, perhaps. But it is expressing emotion, and that's the key thing to the expressionist movement of art. There's always a subject, and the emotions are heightened through the use of color, shape, or texture. Here we see Franz Marc's Blue Horses. This is a delightful piece. It isn't frightening like the last one. And he's done the horses in a beautiful shade of blue, and then the hills and these warm colors behind the horses. It's delightful. It gives us this feeling of joy. So he's expressing something very different through his use of color and shape. So this is why we call it Expressionism.
Yep, he just said everything that we just talked about. It's manipulating those elements using distortion, exaggeration, and color, but doing it in a way to express specific emotions. And we've kind of been talking about expressing meaning the past few weeks. Of course, last week was a bit of a mess. So this week we're just kind of focusing more on the emotional aspect of Expressionism. So does anyone sort of have any questions about what we just talked about? Now, before anybody asks, I will be going over the assignment due next week tomorrow. And we're just going to kind of work with this week because I know that we don't have school on Friday. So does anybody have any questions about what we talked about today? Anybody have any ideas? Any questions? So again, we're thinking about distortion, exaggeration, color, manipulating those elements of art to not create accurate portrayals, but to create emotional experiences. Okay, I am going to play a video that I found that you guys might like and see how long that lasts for the rest of the class period. If not, if you guys haven't, I would take this time also to turn your assignment in that's due tomorrow, or wait to do that later, or if you've done it already, good job. So let's see if I can find that video again. Oh, it was about, before I find it, who knows who Jackson Pollock is? Anyone know that name? So Jackson Pollock was a very important artist in the Expressionist movement. And he was known for making these sort of gesture paintings. And his were extremely abstract. And for some reason, it's not letting me go to images. Or maybe it's loading. Yeah, these Chromebooks aren't great, guys. I'll admit.
Wait a minute, Chromebooks?
Or whatever this is. But yeah. So yeah, looking at his work, it's very abstract because what he's doing is he's either dripping or flicking the paint all over his canvas. And he's doing this to sort of more of capture the mindset of the artist, and the artist, of course, being him. And I have this video I wanted to show you guys about Jackson Pollock's work. I guess this is more about his kind of technique. I guess it's not yellow anymore, so that's nice.
I think it's probably because you're on a different setup.
Probably. Sorry, I wish this would be loading faster, but internet is not good. So this artist is sort of replicating Jackson Pollock's painting style. See if we can get it to start. We almost had it.
Prior to the making of this painting, Pollock was working on a small easel painting. He'd struggled on it for a while, and he decided to take that painting off the easel, place it on the floor, and then pour some paint on the surface to finish it. From this deceptively simple decision, an entire set of creative possibilities opened up to Pollock, and he spent the next 5 years of his career exploring them. Now in the studio, let's see exactly how Pollock worked. Placing the canvas on the floor, Pollock no longer remained in physical contact with the canvas while painting. Instead of using conventional artist brushes to push or smear liquid paint across the surface of the painting, Pollock now used things like sticks, even turkey basters, or dried paintbrushes, hard as a rock, that he variously dripped, drizzled, poured, or splashed paint onto the canvas below him from. Pollock used very fluid alkyd enamel paints, the kind of paint you could paint your car with, the kind of paint you could paint your radiator with. Because the paint was so fluid, Pollock essentially drew in space, so that drawing elements would happen quite literally in the air before falling down to the canvas below. Sometimes thick, sometimes thin, a rhythm of poured paint would develop across the surface of the painting. Now, if you know that the painting was painted on the floor, if you know that the paint has a very low viscosity, you can very easily imagine the kind of physical activities that would go into the making of this type of painting. Art historians at the time coined this kind of painting action painting, because of this very idea that you could imagine quite viscerally the actions that went into the making of the painting. Now specifically, we're talking about the actions of almost a dancer. You can imagine Pollock's feet shuffling around the painting. You can imagine rotations of the elbow and of the shoulder, variously launching or slowly drizzling paint onto the canvas below. For Pollock, the drama of making this painting on the floor meant that not only physically but emotionally he could be in the painting, stepping into the canvas, but also losing himself in almost this trance-like or zone-like type of painting process. Looking at the paint below you on the surface of the canvas, reacting to it, and adjusting whatever gestures you have to create this painting. Now, traditionally in painting, people would compose one shape according to another one. A little bit of red here, according to a little bit of blue there, according to a lot of yellow over here. But for Pollock, he threw that out the window, as he did so many things. Rather, Pollock is composing one line in juxtaposition with another one. And not in any haphazard way, but rather in an all-over way. And this all-overness, if you will, becomes key for Pollock. Since looking at this painting, there's no one spot for your eye to rest. Traditionally, line had been used, quite literally, to delineate forms, to draw the outlines of forms.
So we're not going to be doing too much with action painting or the works of Pollock, mostly because it's a very messy process, as Dr. Arnone can probably relate to. I think you know it's a very messy process. So we already have enough cleaning up to do as it is with the disinfecting of everything. But I also have my own personal opinions about Jackson Pollock. I think he's a very important artist. I don't really like his work that much, but that's just me. And you probably won't be doing this for your assignment for next week. But I think he's a very important because he did help sort of propel this kind of painting and kind of make this painting more, apparent to artists and also, art lovers in the U.S.